baby. Go, sexy. Show me some.
Taking it as Bergeron, nicely able to step away. From Winifred, they score!
Here's a chance. Patra right in, and goalie scores. Oh my, what a move by the rookie.
2-on-1. Pastrnak moving in with Marchand. Get it to it. Score! Into the zone. Hoyle dances in. Backhand. Score!
Lindholm right wing corner. Pastrnak is there. He scores! David Pastrnak wins it for Boston.
Hey, everybody. Welcome in to another episode of Bruins Tape to Tape. I'm your host this week, Caroline, and I am joined on Tuesday, November 5th by fabulous co-host Maria. Hey, Maria.
Hello, Caroline with a K. It's also a very important day for all of us here in the good old US of A, Election Day. So I'm hoping we can offer all of our listeners a little bit of a respite from all of the ads, the coverage, and the angst of waiting for votes to be counted.
Absolutely. And of course, today being a Tuesday, it is a game day, but we had to squeeze in a recording because, shockingly, I do have a life outside of hockey. So I was not available tomorrow, our usual recording day. So by the time you listen,
dare you?
I know, how dare I have friends outside of the hockey community. But by the time you all listen to this, the Boston Bruins will have played the Toronto Maple Leafs for the second time this season, and hopefully we are listening with great joy in our hearts by the end of that game. But we'll dive right in because obviously Maria and I have our own homework to do, which is to watch and enjoy the Boston Bruins trounce the tomato.
We can call them tomatoes. We can call them tomatoes, and they'll be without Austin Matthews tonight in case anyone hasn't heard that. So
I actually haven't. So please.
Yes, he is apparently not available for the game this evening against the Bruins. I think they're calling it a lower body injury. So that was the news today.
Okay.
So let's go, Boston Bruins. Take advantage of that.
Let's do this. So a little quick setting of the table and some miscellaneous things that have been happening for the team. Interesting, Max Jones on waivers, which is really fascinating. If you listened to our episode over the summer about Max Jones and really wondering if he was going to be the next up and coming little pest. And I got to tell you, Maria, it wasn't him. Apparently that was Mark Kastelik this entire time. So who knew that would be a little bit of a role reversal? And in his stead, we're thinking Tyler Johnson finally signed to a 1-year deal, league minimum $775. And hopefully he is just that little extra something for the Boston Bruins as they attempt to dig themselves out of the hole that they had put themselves in during the first 10 games of the season. So we believe
he spoke very highly of him after their skate, and Tyler Johnson has a pretty decent pedigree and hockey resume. Yep. He is a Stanley Cup champion, played with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So he is not going to be the savior. However, it's always good to have that type of mentality and pedigree in your locker room, particularly when you've got some younger players in the room as well. So,
yeah, absolutely. With the departure of Kevin Shattenkirk and James Van Riemsdyk from last season, and then the season prior with the loss of Nick Foligno, the Bruins started the year without that kind of veteran presence who kind of comes in. It seems to be that's the MO for the last couple of years for this team, to just be a little bit of something extra, a little, helping with the bottom six, providing some additional veteran support for the younger players, or the players who maybe have never really made a deep run into the playoffs. And so it's great news. I think it's something we've all been waiting for, and hopefully it turns out as successfully as it did with Dan Heinen a year ago. We got real lucky there. So hopefully that works out in our favor. We're very excited.
I was excited about Max Jones too over the course of the summer, just from the size standpoint and a bit of skill. But what you've seen of him in the 4 games, again, very small sample size, I get it, but he took some really silly penalties during the course of the games that he played, and just didn't seem to be effective enough to warrant giving him additional opportunities. So let's see if he clears waivers. If he clears waivers, I guess he'll go down to Providence, but there is some speculation on social media that, he could be picked up just based on his size. So let's see what happens either way with this player.
Yep. And that's basically breaking news. So we should know shortly, maybe even by the time you've listened to this podcast episode, his fate will have been decided. So we shall see. We've also got another busy week ahead. We'll also talk a little bit about Jim Montgomery. He's been, if not in the actual hot seat, certainly in the hot seat per the Bruins Nation court, if you will. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of what's been going on and how he's responded to a lot of this pressure of the Bruins basically just stinking it up out there. I have to publicly admit on our podcast, because I promised I would, that David Pasternak's mustache is indeed fantastic and solves all problems. So I have to be a fan of David Pasternak's mustache.
Let's see if it solves his turnover problems. We'll talk about that later on in our episode.
Exactly. So that was for Anna, friend of the pod. She's been on before. Great contributor to the community, and an excellent writer for Columbus Blue Jackets and Detroit Red Wings content. So check her out. And then we don't want to forget, we have another live watch party happening this weekend on the 9th of November. We'll be live. If you're a Discord member, you actually get to be on screen with us. So another reason to come on and join our Discord. But otherwise, we will be live streaming. That link is going to end up on our different socials. So again, if you're not already following us on Threads, on Instagram, Twitter, all the places, do so you can watch along with us and chat with us, because it's Linus's return to Boston.
I was just going to say, yep. So
it's a big game.
You might want to tune in for that, because that should be a little bit of a big deal.
It is. I think it is. I think everyone's going to be kind of wondering, are they going to hug or not? That would be weird, but also not. I don't know.
Maybe they'll do a pre-game out of the line of vision, but I don't think as competitors there should be any hugging at the end of said game.
I know, but everyone's going to want to see the hug. We'll learn. We will find out.
They won't, but it will just be a little bit bizarre.
It will. And then some around the rink news, because as I like to always say, it's important to know what's happening around the league. And the biggest news, I think, this week, and the most important news, is the fact that the head of the NHLPA, Marty Walsh, has decided to get an advisory committee together to start actually talking about CTE. As our listeners probably know, it's often been discussed in the context of the National Football League. But if you have a pair of eyeballs and a brain, you know that concussions are a serious problem. Head hits are a serious problem and part of the game when you play hockey. And who knows if it's just because of the nature of the popularity of football over hockey in the United States. But it's about time. And I know I'm super thrilled to see that the league is taking that seriously, because that is something that's really serious. And as a parent of a hockey player, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners either played hockey or were also parents of hockey players, the league and the NHLPA facing this head on can only mean positive things further down the line, all the way down to, our mini mites kids. So very exciting.
Marty's making the league. Marty's going to make the league face this head on, because the league has been resistant to even acknowledging CTE.
Yep.
And, there was a lawsuit a few years ago in some instances where you had owners who were unwilling to acknowledge that CTE was a thing. There is enough actual medical research to show that CTE is real.
Yep.
It's repeated blows to the head. And, I understand when people say, athletes know what they're signing up for. Yes, I will agree with that. But that doesn't excuse or dismiss the fact that this is something that is real, it is tangible, and it needs to be addressed. And I think Marty Walsh is the guy to do it.
Yeah.
And he will not let the league skate, so to speak, on this issue moving further. So kudos to him, and kudos to the Players Association for establishing this advisory committee.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in reference to the lawsuit, this happened in 2019. The NHL agreed to pay $18.5 million to settle a concussion lawsuit brought by 100 former players, something that the league spent at least $70.6 million in legal fees defending. And Gary Bettman, as recently as 2023, has said that the, quote, relationship between concussions and the asserted clinical symptoms of CTE remains unknown, which is patently false. So
bullshit.
And
no, it's
it doesn't.
No, it's bullshit. It's just total bullshit. We could have an entire podcast
and it's not even,
on this. We are the owner of our own Boston Bruins.
Yeah. Yep.
During a deposition, indicated that he didn't even know what CTE was.
Right.
So please, it's just, it's a load of crap.
Yeah.
It's a load of crap. And it's time because if they acknowledge it, then they have to address it. Then they have to provide resources and services to the players who suffer from CTE. Right. So,
and it's not even just concussions, right? You don't have to have repeated concussions to experience this. It's just blows to the head, right? So how many times, you see how many times a hit is laid out. That can be enough. So we're thrilled because this is forcing the league to move in the right direction to keep players safe at every level of the game. That's really what's the most important. So,
and aren't you supposed to be protecting your players? They're your most valuable asset. Right. So their safety should come first and foremost.
Yep. Exactly. The other kind of little bit of side news around the rink, but also related to the Boston Bruins. Don Sweeney was recently seen at a couple of non-Boston Bruins games. What we are speculating, of course, is some scouting for the Four Nations, because he is GM of one of the teams. So that just kind of reminded me that, that's kind of around the corner. I believe they have a deadline. Is it the end of this month? I could be making that entirely up, but I feel like it's at the end of this month or at some point in December where team rosters have to be finalized. So
I think sometime in December. I think right. I think sometime in December.
It's coming up. It is
coming up. Yeah, it'll be here before anyone knows it. I wish I could say that I'm getting excited about it, but I'm not quite there yet.
Baby steps. We've got other things to worry about and discuss. Yeah. And of course, the last kind of big piece of news around the league, Alexander Ovechkin has 35 to go. And nobody in the league still knows what goaltender interference is. But we'll leave those things in the show notes because we're here to talk about the Boston Bruins. So before we dive into our stick taps and we talk about who belongs or what belongs in the penalty box, let's do a super quick break and hear from our sponsors. There's nothing like seeing a hockey game live, especially an NHL game. But ticket prices can be outrageous these days. That's why I use the Game Time app. Game Time has tickets for all kinds of live events. Plus, they have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see the Bruins play live even easier. I love how I can get curated deals that make it easier to find the best prices on seats, and I can preview the seat view before I buy. And the lowest price guarantee is huge. Tickets at TD Garden don't come cheap these days. Game Time guarantees the lowest price or they will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code THPN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code THPN for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. The quest for the Stanley Cup starts now. The puck's dropping on the 24-25 season. Get in on all the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. Maria and I like to put a little money down on individual player performances. And if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
So, speaking of DraftKings, I may have put just a little wager on Pavel Zacha as an anytime goal scorer tonight.
My God. Please, that
He's
poor
due.
man.
He's due.
So, the last we chatted, it was the day before Halloween. Boston Bruins played on Halloween. Now, my question to you is this. That terrifying game down in Carolina, did the Boston Bruins in that moment hit rock bottom, in your opinion?
In my opinion, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. That was disturbing, embarrassing. I couldn't find one good thing to write in my little notebook about that game. And the first thing that came to mind for me was, this is not good for Jim Montgomery. That kind of a loss. And again, the lines were all discombobulated. I understand the premise of what he was doing by splitting up a fourth line of Kastelik, Kepke, and Beecher in an effort to sprinkle those guys throughout the other lines so that it would send a message to the other players about how to play hard, how to skate hard, how to be, make good decisions with the puck. Unfortunately, I think it in that instance in Carolina backfired. Just everything backfired. To the degree that you had to pull Jeremy Swayman because even he couldn't get the bleeding to stop. Carolina just did whatever they wanted to do to the Bruins whenever they wanted to do it in that game.
So I think it's fair to say, because we're talking about these 3 games in particular since we last chatted, the loss to the Carolina Hurricanes and then the back-to-back over the weekend with the Flyers and the Seattle Kraken, that when it comes to our stick taps and the penalty box, I'm going to just come out and say that the Carolina game is in its entirety ended up in the box, and the 2 games that came after it ended up getting stick taps just in the hole because it seemed like it was a very Jekyll and Hyde, very Halloween thematic week for us as Boston Bruins fans. I think I agree with you. Every single thing just seemed to go wrong in that Carolina game. I can't even articulate just how bad that game was to watch.
I'm not even going to pull up any stats because there was really, again, if one of our listeners can find something good out of that game, I'm happy to listen to it, and I'm happy to make note of it. But
well, here's one thing, maybe, and now I say maybe only because 2 games a championship season does not make.
Yes.
But maybe the one positive that came out of that game was a day off filled with some soul searching, because we've talked about this. We talked about this last week. We've definitely brought it up a couple of times prior, where it seemed like from the moment that Brad Marchand received the tongue lashing from Jim Montgomery, whether it was that moment, he was finally getting up to speed, combination of everything, perfect storm, but he started to bring it. And in my opinion, and you can certainly argue otherwise, he was literally the only player, with the exception of the goaltenders, because again, their role in the game is very different. And our goaltending has been fine, good, right? Like no arguments in spite of everything else. But he seems to have been the only player who was dragging the team from the brink of destruction, right? The cliff edge. I saw him go out there and bring it to the level that we know and love, and literally nobody else had. And so that was very troubling. I think that was the biggest thing that I took away from that particular game, is he was the only one. And then, like you said, the goaltender situation, they just couldn't stop the bleeding. And I think what came out of that also was, for me at least, that was the first time. I don't know if it was the first time for you, because I try not to go down this road quickly in difficult game situations, but starting to wonder how safe was Jim Montgomery's job.
Well, you weren't the only one. We had touched upon that in the previous episode because things hadn't been going well. We also acknowledged that, this is a roster that was not playing well. There is talent on this roster. So then you go in and you're flying to, Carolina. You're facing a team in the Eastern Conference that is in it to win it. They're built to win it. And, the hope was that you might generate some, momentum, or you might be able to get yourself up for a game against, a playoff, likely going to be a playoff team. Then you basically, lay a rotten egg and you crap all over yourselves, for, lack of a better phrase. You pooped all over yourselves. It was demoralizing. And you talk about hitting rock bottom.
It was embarrassing.
It was embarrassing.
Embarrassing.
It was one of their most embarrassing losses since
it's been a minute.
22, I think.
Yeah. And I think that it was also handed to them by the Carolina Hurricanes.
Which is, that building has been a house of horrors for you anyways, right? Been a house of horrors for you anyways. Then you fly to Philadelphia and you're supposed to have practice on Monday, right?
Yeah.
Practice is canceled. So, when you see the struggles of a team that should be performing better than they have been just because of the composition of the roster, of course, there's going to be discussion and conversation and speculation about the stability and the status of a coach who, by the way, still hasn't been extended yet. Because we all know you can't fire a whole team. You're not going to fire a whole team.
Right.
Who's going to be, who would have been the potential fall guy?
Right. Exactly. So there was a really great question out there on Threads this past week. It happened probably in between the disastrous game and the Flyers game. So to Real Dudas, Monk, the question was, what is all this talk about firing Monty? We aren't even to the All-Star break yet. So for our newer listeners and our new fans of hockey, there are a number of reasons why and how an NHL coach loses his job. One, it could happen at the end of the season because you know what? It's just been too many seasons where we didn't get as far as we wanted to get. Look at Bruce Cassidy, right? He got let go after they made a second round exit that season, maybe first round. But also another reason why a coach might lose his job is because he's lost the room. And that also is what happened with Bruce Cassidy. Not only was he just really not getting them back to where they were, but he lost the room for all intents and purposes. A coach may lose his job mid-season because he's doing just an absolutely atrocious job. And that I think is what you will often see earlier in the season. And then the third reason a coach may lose his job is exactly the reason that you were saying, which is no matter how hard he tries, no matter what he tries every possible thing he could think of to essentially snap him out of a funk, right? Because that's where the Bruins are at. The Bruins aren't a crappy team that doesn't have the talent and the skill set. Bruce. See, it's one of those days. Jim Montgomery isn't a coach, who doesn't have good coaching skills. It became a mental battle. And so you got to do something to snap him out of it. And you can't fire the team. You can't say to David Pastrnak, all right, well, you're done. We're going to get rid of you now. Like, that's the most ludicrous opinion I have actually seen out there on the internet. Like, sit down. But in those cases, it's the coach. And in that case, they are collateral damage. And I had some serious, and that's, to me, as a fan, as a hockey fan, I think is just the crummiest way to get fired. That just sucks. I have so much empathy for the coach and the coaching staff if anyone goes with him, because like in that case, it's not really his fault, right? He's doing everything he possibly can, and it's the last resort to stop the bleeding. And so, you know, to our new listeners, that's why that conversation hit such a fevered pitch. And that's why I had found myself finally in that camp of not saying like he should go, but genuine concern that I'm thinking he might not go back to Boston with them. He might be on a separate plane to Boston and they go to Philly.
Well, and in this instance too, there's a little bit, you know, of a subtle difference because he hasn't been extended. And so that puts him in kind of an unique / awkward position. And sometimes the only alternative that a GM has, because the GM isn't going to fire himself, right? So he's that's just not going to happen. And in order to send a message to the room, to the leaders, to the players, is sometimes having to let the coach go, where the players have to look at themselves in the
look
mirror,
what you made me do.
each other, right? I mean, in this instance, it didn't happen. Doesn't mean that it still won't or can't happen. But that's where that conversation came from. Just because you're not getting the results that you were expecting to get with a competent, you know, more than competent NHL roster.
Yeah. And the fact is, you know, again, because of that roster, because of the very, very high expectations that everyone has of Boston, time was slowly running out, right? You know, if we were talking about the Buffalo Sabres, okay, yeah, they could wait till the All-Star break. They could wait till Thanksgiving, maybe, because like, are they really going to make the playoffs anyways, right? No, probably not. But in the case of the Boston Bruins, it got to such a situation where, you know, there's only so many games that you can kind of fritter away at this point in the season. We've said this in
Countless
past
times.
There's
enough
these are the
parity
games
in the leagues that you can ill afford.
Right. These are the games you have to win to have in your back pocket.
Got to have these games in the bank, so to speak.
Exactly. This is what happened with Boston when they hit that slide, you know, after the All-Star break last year. It's what got Florida into the playoffs. If not the year they lost in the Cup final, maybe even the year before, because they started the season like a gun went off and then they really petered out, but they still made the playoffs. And that's what really ultimately matters. Right. So that's kind of the thinking. I mean, also, of course, you know, alongside the head coach, I would not have been surprised if, and I was actually surprised that I didn't hear more of a conversation or a buzz around questioning how this would potentially impact Don Sweeney, because the GM is the person who puts the team together. So you got all these guys who have a phenomenal resume. You picked them because of what's there on their resume, and they're not performing. That also is the responsibility of your GM, because that's his literal job, to put a team together. So is he going to be in any kind of hot seat? I don't think necessarily. I would say if Montgomery either had lost his job this weekend or, you know, they start tanking again and he does lose his job at some point mid-season, and then whoever kind of comes on, and if that doesn't work to shock the system for the Boston Bruins, then I think you'd start to hear some rumblings and some question marks around, okay, is this the end of Don Sweeney? I'm not saying that we are anywhere near there, but like that's kind of where it falls in the order of operations when it comes to using firings of non-players to get the players to start doing their job. But
and these are not to the our listener's question, which I thank him for. These are not. It's not common, but it's not uncommon for a coach to be fired at this juncture of the season. And
look at Edmonton.
Typically, yes, right? And and we talked about that in our last episode. It happened in Edmonton, and then Edmonton went on a 14. They won 14 games in a row, which was craziness. But in this instance, you were just at at a point where you're like, what the hell is going on here? Something, and we weren't the only ones saying it. Now we're talking as if, everything has been fixed and remedied with a couple of wins.
Yeah.
No, there's still a lot of work to be done. However, if that ass kicking from the Carolina Hurricanes is what the leaders on this team and other players on this team needed, and then the chatter about Monty potentially being
and they knew. They knew.
They might not listen. They don't listen to us. They don't listen to sports talk radio. However, their family members do, right? Their family members and close friends and close relationships, or, maybe even their agents, they're getting messages saying, hey, people in Boston are saying like Monty's going to get shit canned, right? And so they hear it indirectly. And if that's what it takes, unfortunately, because the last 2 seasons, we've gotten off to tremendous starts.
Yeah.
Tremendous starts. So there was none of this conversation. This is somewhat normal for a lot of teams, folks, Yeah.
I mean, by the end of last season, I think like half of the coaches got fired across the league. But I want to put Carolina to bed because I liked what I saw for the most part. Any final thoughts about Carolina before we take a super quick break from another sponsor?
Yeah, just quickly, I just want to share a point that one of our ex-followers and a listener, a very loyal listener to our podcast made.
Twitter following. That you meant
Twitter,
ex, like former.
Well, ex Twitter. I don't know. I don't know what the hell to call it. Formerly known as Twitter. We had talked about, do we have concerns? And, 10 games in, he does have concerns. Special teams could be much better. Their play on both ends of the ice is a bit too predictable. No one is stepping up except for the fourth line. And yes, all of your points or forever are absolutely on point. But I think we have seen some signs of improvement.
Yeah.
The last 2 games, and we'll talk about those in our stick taps after our next ad break.
Every year, I'm on the hunt for that special deal on a gadget for myself or my family. It's also a bit stressful needing to wait until the literal end of November to find it. Except with Raycon, because with Raycon, you get an amazing deal on premium audio every day of the year. But that doesn't mean they're not having any sales for Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Far from it. They're actually doubling down on their amazing value by offering our viewers up to 30% site-wide. A Black Friday, Cyber Monday deal you'll appreciate every day? Raycon's everyday earbuds. especially if you haven't checked out their latest model, which includes plenty of new features that make them even more a must-have for any audio lover. For example, they now feature a 32-hour battery life and multi-point connectivity that lets you pair with 2 devices at once. Raycon's everyday earbuds also come with active noise cancellation. It's a feature that's a must-have for me when I'm watching the Bruins play, but one that can be difficult to find at an accessible price point. Until now. Because that's another thing. Although Raycon's quality rivals some of the biggest names in premium audio, Raycons start at just half the price as the other guys. So they're already an incredible deal, even before you factor in their Black Friday and Cyber Monday offer of up to 30% off site-wide. Personally, I find them to be stylish and comfortable. Raycon's everyday earbuds are also available in a variety of vibrant colors, so you don't have to just have the standard issued white or black earbuds sticking out of your ears. I love purple, but I am really eyeing those red ones right now. Now's the perfect time to scoop them up if you haven't already, and don't worry if you're not as impressed as I am. Raycon offers a 30-day happiness guarantee, so you really can't lose. It's time to save big for Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Go to buyraycon.com/THPN today to get up to 30% off site-wide. That's right, you'll get up to 30% off everything on Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/THPN.
All right. So, Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
We saw some pretty significant improvement, I will say. Now, again, I feel like I haven't seen one of those complete and utter domination games really yet this season. Maybe the Avs game, but again, now that is going further and further in the rearview mirror. It doesn't. I can't even remember now.
Right.
So, what were you thinking were the biggest changes that you saw, not just from the Carolina game, which I think was the ultimate expression of everything that had been going wrong all season thus far? What were your biggest takeaways from both of those games? Because I think, in my opinion, they were relatively similar. The Bruins certainly played a 60-minute game in Philadelphia, and they probably played a 45-minute.
I was just going to say 45-minute-ish game.
They were getting slowed down.
They had their second period wasn't awesome.
Yeah.
Against the Kraken. But you know, the improvements for me. Now let's start with the Flyers game was a 3-0 win. The Kraken game was a 2-0 win. You could argue that the Kraken game could have been a 4 or 5-0 win.
Should have been,
right?
Easily. Yeah.
But the areas of improvement were, you had, Jonas, who netted his first shutout as a Boston Bruin against the Flyers. Then Swayman backs that up with a shutout against the Kraken. And I'll tell you, both goalies, like Jonas was very, very good in the Flyers game. He made a couple of stick saves and glove saves that were tremendous. And I've been really impressed. He seems to get better with each game that he plays. Now, Jonas hadn't played in like 13 days. 13 days.
I know.
He hadn't had a start. And he was moving side to side like he didn't skip a beat. So
no, he was on point.
Those are very positive trends from the Bruins standpoint, from a goaltending standpoint. Brad Marchand was vintage Brad Marchand in that Flyers game.
Everything
you could see that old, the puck dangling and just, beaten feet to get into the offensive zone. skating around the net while still maintaining control of the puck. The other thing that I liked from that game is the Flyers game is Pavel Zacha had a shoot first mentality. And again, that he's a guy that you still now he hasn't been rewarded yet, folks, because he still hasn't scored. However, he's taking a lot more shots, and he carried that mentality over into the Kraken game, and I'm almost starting to feel a little bad for him. Like
I know, I feel like
once one goes in, they're going to start going in, but at least he is focusing on his offense as well as because he's been great from a defensive standpoint. I think he's been very, very good, but I think that's come at the expense of not making things happen for himself and for his line mates offensively. So that's been good stuff as far as I'm concerned. I also saw the resurgence of Charlie Coyle in these last 2 games, which
he stepped up after, I would definitely say after, what I call the day of soul searching. I think he responded to whatever happened that day. We will never know, but I think he responded very, very well to that, as he should have, because even though he doesn't wear a letter on his chest, I consider him a veteran leader of that team. And so loved the response from him, and he was rewarded.
Yes, I think he scored a power play goal against the Kraken, where he basically undressed Joey Decord with a couple of slick moves with his hands. It was
wonderful.
Another chef's kiss. Charlie McAvoy was making his presence known over the weekend, because you've got to get more. It's imperative. I'm sorry, but it is imperative. You've got to get more out of Charlie Coyle. One of the reasons that Sweeney went out and signed Zadorov, who comes with his strength and weaknesses, was so that Charlie could be freed up to be a bit more of a impactful during a game, and he needs to start taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
And now David Pastrnak had a lot of shots during the course of these 2 games. However, and I don't know if we want to get there yet, or we still want to stay
get there
with
because we might as well. Let's talk about
the benching heard round the world, folks.
Yeah. So what did you think about that? Because I think there was some question towards the end of the game. Judd pointed out, hey, Pasta, it was halfway through the 3rd period. Pasta hadn't been out there. And then they reported after a TV timeout, he went out, he did a little bit of skating around, some edge work, questioning, is he injured? Was he testing something out? But then he proceeded to not be played for the rest of that period. And Jim Montgomery responded to questions in that it was a coach's decision, which typically is a coded way of saying,
well, he doesn't want to embarrass his star player, right?
Without him.
And that's all he should have said if he had, especially if he hadn't had the opportunity to talk to David Pastrnak.
Sure.
Man to man about what happened.
Yeah. I mean, now, how could he, right?
We need to give the whole history of what happened. It was late in the 2nd period, and Pasta was trying to do too much with the puck. Bruins were on a power play. He had an egregious turnover, which led to a shorthanded opportunity. He's lucky that his goalie saved his ass, because if that had gone in, that would have been a 2-1 game.
Yep.
And it would have could have potentially changed the entire momentum of the game. To which Montgomery's response was to sit him. He stayed on the bench, came out with the team, but he did not touch the ice for the entirety of the 3rd period.
Yeah. Which I think is really interesting that this season, Monty has really stepped up in that regard. We talked about that with Brad Marchand, and, we've seen that before, like Tom Brady and getting, publicly, so to speak, called out. And that's what happened with Brad Marchand. This effectively was the same thing for David Pastrnak. I'm super curious if something happened, in front of the team to Charlie McAvoy too, and it wasn't as public, like we didn't get to see it, but if there was something else that had happened there, and I think rightly so, like at this point, these are your leaders, and if they are not stepping up and doing everything they possibly can, yes, they can't make another player play better or differently, but they can set that example. And, I saw that in Brad Marchand coming back from that and like literally trying to pull this team by himself. And so hopefully tonight we see David Pastrnak do the exact same thing. He was able to respond to some of that kind of criticism from Jim Montgomery during the playoffs, which is all fine and good. But like also, David, you shouldn't have to wait for that to happen to light a fire under your ass.
That's a well, though. You got to be careful on how many times you go to that well. Now, David Pastrnak said all of the right things when he was asked about it. He took accountability, said he needed to be better. Brad Marchand took accountability when Montgomery, and I wasn't a fan of that. I prefer the David Pastrnak method of how he did. I think those conversations and that kind of fieriness, like that in that instance, should be in the locker room. Yeah. But that's just me. That's just me. Yeah. Marchand seemed fine with it. And we all saying that the leaders on this team, who in essence are your best players, need to be your best players.
Yeah.
And they weren't performing up to the standards that we know and we have seen them perform to. So, what else can a coach do? You can mix and match lines all you want. The Toronto goalie just went down hard with a shot he blocked.
Yeah.
He is struggling.
From David Pastrnak. So
yeah. He's struggling to get up. It was on the power play too, but he is laboring to get up. Sorry, I digress. Yeah. But we had talked about this ad nauseum. My only concern is, that to some degree is what killed Bruce Cassidy's tenure here.
Yeah, he went Boston a little too far, too frequently.
Too many times. Now, this is the first time we've seen Monty pull this card. The fact that he's had to pull it a couple of times in a relatively short period of time, I'm not gonna dump on him for that, because
he's literally trying everything he possibly
something needed to happen. Right. Somebody needed to throw a cold bucket of water on this team and tell them to wake the hell up.
And he's lucky that he was able to capitalize on a moment where he could afford to bench David Pastrnak, because the team was doing well enough that he could say, no, you're going to sit. Because I think, in all reality, if the game was tighter, if it was a lot more competitive, he probably wouldn't have benched him, because you want to try and you'll take the
he wouldn't have sat him for the entire period. Right. He would not have sat him for the entire period. That would have been, problematic. But he must have a good enough rapport, he being Monty, with the leaders on his team, that he knows that he's able to do that without fear of some type of
losing the
disconnect or having it impact the locker room in a detrimental way. And Monty himself even said that he feels very, I don't know what the words were that he used, but, blessed or lucky to work with the leaders that he works with on the Boston Bruins.
That he has that kind of relationship.
Yeah. So let's hope that, what we saw against now I know, folks, it's the Philadelphia freaking Flyers. Yes, okay.
But
a win is a win. Win is a
and
win.
they lost horribly a week prior. So
yeah, and the Seattle Kraken are not, they're not a cupcake team in the league.
They have not been winning, but they were in a state of desperation that, that's
and they
why
showed their desperation in that second period in the game because they were taking it to the Bruins, and there was a little bit of bend don't break going on, and you wanted them to get back on that offensive horse. And I think they they weathered the storm. They weathered the storm, and they came out with a very much needed win, 2 wins in a row. That and they needed that for their own self-confidence, I think, too, because I think that's a real thing.
Definitely. So Leafs game has started. We've been chatting for our full time at this point. What is one thing in particular that you want to see the Bruins continue to capitalize on this week?
Well,
that they maybe started to do well.
Yes,
we're building.
I need the players to still maintain a shoot first mentality. There are players on this team that I still think on occasion are much too deferential. If you see the shot, please take the goddamn shot. Okay, take the goddamn shot. The other thing, we didn't get to our penalty box, but I'm still not happy with the power play because there have been numerous instances where you have the opportunity to put a dagger in a team if you can simply capitalize. No one's expecting you to capitalize on every power play opportunity, but when you get 5 in a game and you only capitalize on 1, to me that's a problem. You pop in another goal or 2 and you've demoralized a team, and you've given them doubt to think that they can even get back in the game or stay in the game with you.
Yeah, 100%. For me, I think I want to keep seeing that effort and the commitment that I saw, especially against the Flyers, that we hadn't seen outside of, again, Brad Marchand. But, that means taking the shots, but it means also running and skating and negating that icing like Gigi did, or just going that extra step. You know what I mean? Because we hadn't been seeing that. So I just want to see that overall attitude continue, because I think that's a serious piece that was lacking.
Just give me hardworking shifts every time you're out there. Give me a hardworking 60-minute game.
Make it hard for them.
And make it hard for them. If you lose 2-1, you lose 3-2, you walk away and you say, okay, the effort, effort is always there.
Right.
But we hadn't been seeing that consistently enough. So, and I'm seeing a lot of jump. I've got the game streaming right now, and I'm seeing a lot of jump in the Bruins Bruins play to start this game. So
setting the tone.
No Austin Matthews, but you know what? Take advantage of the gifts that you're given.
Right. Then they have no excuse. So hopefully the next time we chat, the Bruins will have trounced the Toronto Maple Leafs and everyone else who follows, because I think we got a couple of other Canadian teams to go up against.
Calgary Flames coming to Boston on Thursday.
And Ottawa.
And then Ottawa, and then off to St. Louis.
So it should be an interesting week. They should be able to get some good points by the time we chat next. So
yes, they need to keep building. Listen, there'll be lulls in the season, but right now they need to trend upwards and not do any sliding back, because that the chatter and the speculation will continue if that's the kind of slide that you're going to use this season.
Exactly. Well, as always, Maria, thank you so much for fantastic conversation. Let's go see them beat those Leafs, eh?
Hey, it's always a good day.
Absolutely. Well, and to all of our listeners, don't forget, follow us on our social medias, like and subscribe, leave a review because it helps us find other hockey friends. And as always, go Bees.
Go Bees.